at the end of the day, like networking is just a matter of just being there and being around. And the more you're around and in those situations, the more comfortable you're going to get talking to people. So it's kind of you gotta put your, one foot in the water before you can, dive all the way in. So it's kind of, you got to start somewhere.
Hey, how's it going? Jeahn in the Hood here. This kind of weird intro, I understand, but let me explain real quick and then we'll hop right into the episode. But this episode, we are talking with Jeff Carpenter from Ready Light Media. He is a prolific photographer, an amazing friend, and just a genuinely all-around really good dude. The reason I'm in my hoodie is because I am finally kind of getting back into my flow of podcasting, and I'm just trying to get this episode out. I had this really strange kind of year where I just kind of got burned out of creating video content in long form for various reasons, but nothing too nefarious. But I'm finally getting back into it and I decided I just need to get it done. So I'm here recording. I didn't get dressed up or anything. It's cold. It's been 9 months since I recorded this episode. So first of all, my apologies for not being consistent with the podcast. But secondly, I hope moving forward that it is really fun and just really casual. I have done less editing on this one, but I think the genuine conversation is actually in a way more entertaining and more valuable than a very high polished podcast would be. We'll see how it goes, but I'm really excited about this conversation. We have a really, really good time. We talk about so many amazing things. Jeff is a fantastic networking person. He has a lot of relationships with big companies, and he's just all around a great guy to try to emulate if this is what you're trying to do with your business, to become a brand ambassador or to just build relationships with people that you care about that are genuine and healthy and not awkward or transactional or just all business. So it's a really good conversation. We talk about so much stuff. Him and I connect in a lot of ways, and I can't thank Jeff enough for his patience in me getting this episode out. But here we are. Here I am in my drab outfit. But I hope you enjoy this episode and have a really great time.
Hold on, my dogs are howling. I gotta stop them before this starts.
Yeah, for sure.
Hey. Can you hear that?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's the husky howl right there.
Yeah, it is. All right.
So, hey Jeff, how you doing, brother? It's been a minute. If you guys didn't know, Jeff and I met on Instagram last year sometime, and I was kind of bothering him in his DMs all the time, pinging him, and eventually I got on his good side, and he invited me to Imaging USA this year, which was a very huge privilege. So thank you so much for that opportunity. But I'll give you a second to introduce yourself. Just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we got a long time to get to that whole thing, but I'm Jeff Carpenter. I own a company called Ready Light Media. That is it's a digital media company, but it's mostly photography. So I started out in photography in 2010, I think, when I graduated college. I went to school for audio production. I don't know how deep you want me to get into the story.
Deep as you want. I'm an audio engineer major myself. So, I mean,
Wait,
I
really?
will go as deep as you want. Yeah.
Did we talk about that?
I don't know. It seems like I
remember. I feel like I would have remembered that. So I did that. The short story is I took a class in photography to start it. I loved it. I basically never worked a day of audio in my life and started doing photography pretty much straight away after college. And I'm mostly a commercial, like portrait and headshot photographer. So I work mostly with businesses, trying to kind of just, help them with their brand. It's a lot of it is just general, what I call like the LinkedIn special headshots. Like somebody comes in because their boss says they need a, LinkedIn photo or something like that. But I work with a fair amount of, on the more creative side as well. And then I teach as well. And that's kind of started out as my creative outlet. And I'm sure we'll kind of dive into those segments a little bit here in a bit. But yeah, long story short, I'm a photographer. I live outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm happy to be here.
Nice. That's awesome. So basically, I think who most people know you from is from your Instagram account, probably, since you have like 3 million followers there. about what, 280?
230, something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Just a number. It's just a number. But
yes,
yeah, so
exactly.
I have an Instagram account that is very geared towards photo education. And it's kind of funny how that started, because I was never really big into social media necessarily, but I started an account on Instagram back, like, I guess back when it was still chronological. So that gives you an indication of when that was. So like before Meta or Facebook bought it. So it was still its own thing. And I really just kind of would put behind the scenes photos on there as more of a reference to myself. I had no intention of really anybody seeing them. But I would post more behind the scenes photos, and those seemed to get a little more traction than the actual photo. So I was like, maybe there's something to this. And I would just kind of just post, and they started getting a little bit of popularity here and there. And one time this guy was like, "Hey, I'm coming through Nashville. Can you, I want to like shadow you and I'll pay you." And I was like, "Oh, people do that? Interesting." So that was kind of my first one-on-one workshop. And then I kind of realized, like, oh, you can make money teaching, and it really had never really crossed my mind, because, I was just a photographer at the time. But yeah, so it all kind of started as really more of a kind of publicly private portfolio for myself, really just more as reference, where I could go back and kind of reference, this was before we had programs like Satellite 3D and stuff like that allowed you to kind of build sets ahead of time. I would have something like, oh, like I can just easily go back and find it. It's just on Instagram, just go scroll through and I have this cool setup that I liked. So that's kind of where the Instagram thing started. I never expected it to really go anywhere as far as like a business, because I basically have two sides of my business. I've got my Ready Light Media, which is my shooting, my commercial business. And then I've got my Next Level Workshops, which has donned a few names over the years. And that's kind of what I've landed on recently. So that turned into something completely different. And they combine in a way, but they are very separate entities. So I have to kind of, the funny thing is Instagram has always been Ready Light Media, and it's really more under the Next Level Workshops brand. But I was so far down that rabbit hole, I was like, I can't change it now, because then no one would know who I was. So I just kept it. And that's kind of where the crossover happens and I get like commercial work through Instagram sometimes, but I certainly don't rely on it, because I think we can't rely on Instagram as a means for direct business. I think it's a business tool, but if you rely on it as your business, I think you're inevitably setting yourself up for, I don't want to say failure, but there is a chance, we have these Instagram outages every once in a while, and everybody loses their mind because they're like, oh, what am I going to do with those, X amount of followers? Like, because you don't own them. Mark Zuckerberg owns them. So, I've been trying to kind of get people off of Instagram onto a like private, email list, or I've got like a private online forum that's there just to help photographers. It's a free thing, but it's been good for me as a tool, but I never went about it as Instagram is my business, or Instagram is very much like, it was never a big part of my business. It's helped my business. And I can't say like, oh, I don't care about social media, because that's a very easy thing to say when you have a decent amount of followers, like, oh, I don't care, it's easy, and I don't want to sound, pretentious or jaded or whatever, but I've never looked at it as this is an integral part of my business, but it's certainly helped. And I've been grateful that it's done what it has, and it's been available.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think one of the big things that I can kind of latch on to is when you when you put all of your trust into one platform or one place, it's like having an indiverse money portfolio, right? Like you could potentially lose it all. Whereas if you kind of have your, kind of diversify where you have your audience and where you have your clients, if one goes down or if rules change or if your account's suspended, you still have a backup plan. And I think it's really smart. And maybe we can dive into this a little bit more. What's your strategy as far as like your online community? Because that's been growing really well and you've kind of just launched it.
Yeah, well, I just launched it again.
Okay.
I had it. It's been around for a little bit, but I never pushed it because there was just very little engagement on there. And quite frankly, there's less than I would like there to be. But I started using basically Instagram comment automation as a way to generate leads for that. And you can use it to generate leads for anything. But I'm trying to get people to like basically funnel them into this free community that then allows them to, chat amongst other photographers, ask questions. It's created to be I feel like this word's overused, but a very safe space for photographers. But it's one of those things where I know that I'm not the foremost expert in a lot of things. So my goal is to get someone who like yourself, who shoots a lot of products. Like you're much more, adapt and qualified to answer a product question than I am as a portrait photographer. Right. So that's kind of my goal, is to get just a big community of people together that can then, help and build each other. And it's not like, I'm not trying to pretend like this is some brand new idea. I mean, that like forums and stuff have been around for ages. I just wanted to do it and kind of leverage, the community I had through Instagram as a, kind of more private, it's not public social media. But it's, I can't remember what your question was now.
It's okay. Basically, it was just like that. I think you covered it. Basically, it's just the idea of, for people who are starting businesses and maybe Instagram's picking up for them, and they're getting on the Reels game and stuff, how can they leverage that? Because, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you could lose that. So don't lose sight of where to point those customers to. Maybe have like a lead magnet or something like you have, like a lighting guide, to get them elsewhere just in case it crashes.
Right. And that was always the intention. I have a lighting guide that I'm like currently working on another one, because this one's 5 years old now. Not that it's not still relevant information. It could be updated. Let's just say that. So that's basically, you have to have like a freebie because the end goal for me in an online community is realistically, it's to build a community to have, but it's also like, I want to sell workshop tickets. Let's be real. So that's kind of that, but I'm never like, I'm so bad at sending out emails as far as like, come to my workshops kind of thing. Cause I hate getting those emails. So I'm very cognizant of not trying to bother people. I'm sure I could probably land a little more in the middle to where I'm still not bothering you, but I'm also doing myself a little help to actually sell tickets. But yeah, like that's kind of twofold. I mean, it's still a business. And if I don't have the ability to run the business, and I can't put time aside to help with, to answer the questions, because then I'd have other things I need to do. So like I do, it's a business, but it's also right now it's still, even though that community and that like the workshops thing has been around since 2018, I would consider it still like in its infancy as far as like what it could be. And the reason I named it Next Level Workshops originally was never because I think I had this vision down the road as like, it could be a workshop about anything. If you want to do a workshop about baking or something like that, I could inevitably bring people into it. It started out, and it's probably for a while going to be just a photography thing, but I wanted to be able to expand beyond, because it originally was Next Level Lighting. And I was like, well, that's a little too niche, because then like it's not, you're pigeonholing yourself essentially into it's just lighting technique, right? So I was like, let's do Next Level Workshops, because then it can be all of photography for now, and then this, that, and the other. You want to have someone teach coding. You want to have somebody teach anything. Like that's kind of my goal. Like let's say a 10-year goal for that is to have like educators underneath it. But in order to do that, you need to have a solid base, in the beginning. And right now it's a forum. So if somebody wants to join and start a forum about something completely unrelated to generic photography stuff, like you can do that. So it's not just, it's just my lead magnet is 100% geared toward photographers. So
gotcha. Nice. I think it's really cool what you have built, and, kind of parallels with Luma University is, I think in the same way, having a vision that's beyond yourself is a really important thing. And I wouldn't say it's what everyone has to do. Obviously, you can build a brand around your name, and that can be very successful. But a lot of people have this. So at my previous job, I used to work for School of Motion, and they taught animation online. And Joey, the CEO, the guy who runs it, he's not the CEO anymore, but he basically started the whole thing. He had this vision of wanting it to last for the next 500 years, 1,000 years, and not be something about him. And so bringing in other people was really important. And when he got to that point, it really made a big difference in, how the platform functioned. And so I think, looking forward to that is a really cool thing, a very honorable thing. And not a lot of people do that.
And I think for me, and I kind of structured Ready Light Media in the same way, as more of like an agency. Like my name was never attached to it, which it has been good and bad. I think, I went into like shooting as I want to work with brands. I'm not, when I first started, and we can go down the story of how I really started shooting. But we'll get there in a second. So I started out as I kind of found out very quickly I didn't want to shoot like weddings or anything like that, where there's like an emotional attachment to the photo. And what I mean by that is in corporate America, like they have a budget and they're like a lot of times the person that you're photographing isn't paying for it. So like the emotional aspect of it is completely detached. So you don't have someone who's like the money's coming out of their personal bank account you do sometimes, but in a lot of cases you don't. Like a wedding where it's like they've saved for this and it's like sometimes it's hard to let go of it. But I see a lot more in weddings, like because there is an emotional aspect of it, having your name attached to it makes sense because it humanizes you a little bit. And I'm not saying that my brand isn't human, but it doesn't need to be. I think a lot of companies, like if you're working with a bigger corporation, they want to feel like someone who is at that level is working with them, and having a brand as my photography company rather than me as Jeff doing it kind of, it helps in that sense. So I think there's no right or wrong way to kind of start your brand if it's, so the way that it has, kind of shot myself in the foot a little bit is I was always starting out. I didn't actually have employees. I still don't. I'm still kind of a one man. I freelance a lot of stuff out, but I didn't have so I would always come. And then I think a lot of my clients just expected me to always show up. So if I ever sent somebody, they would be like, oh, why aren't you there? I was like, well, it's because you're hiring the brand, not me personally. So setting that expectation, was a struggle early on when I would purposely double book. And it wasn't double booking for myself, but I would be like, oh, like as a brand, I can shoot this event and I can shoot this event over here with no conflict because I've got two people that are very capable of doing it that can go do it at the same time. I had this vision of like, it was bigger than myself, like for, I guess, both of my brands kind of thing. But if you want to get down the rabbit hole of how I started shooting, I know I talked about it a little bit in my intro, but I started shooting as a event photographer. So I said I had a class in college where it was a prerequisite. You either took a photography class or you took a culinary class. I just happened to have some friends doing the photography class and I liked it. I was still kind of in this, like I was right about to graduate. I had spent 4 years doing this audio thing. Like, I'm no quitter here. So I'm going to try and do it. And then, but I took a liking to photography, like quite a bit. And the teacher was, who you actually met at Imaging, I think. He like came up to me and we run into each other all the time, but it's funny because he's like, hey, like, I don't just say this, but you should maybe consider doing this. He's like, I know you're about to graduate with this other degree, but like, don't write this off. Essentially, it's kind of the very bridge version of what he said. And I kind of was like, okay, sure, whatever. He's just like says that to people because, it's something teachers do sometimes. So I didn't really think much of it. And then I think I got a camera for like Christmas from my parents or something like that, just randomly. Like I had never expressed, like, I don't even think they knew I took a photography class. It was a very serendipitous, like, they're like, well, like we just saw this and thought you might like it kind of thing, So like, then I was like, well, maybe that's like I'm not a big like believer in like signs, whatever, but I was like, well, let's just kind of see what happens. So I started out, I was like, well, how do I turn this into a business, I guess? And I was like, and that's kind of how my mindset was. I would go around and just shoot random things, like for whatever, just to kind of see what I liked. But then I I looked on Craigslist, and this would have been 2011, 2010, 2011, something like that. And there was an ad for St. Patrick's Day party, and it was $50 for a full day of shooting for $50 and free beer. And I was like, sure, I like just graduated college. I'm like, any money at this point is money, and I'm not going to turn away the free beer either. So I called him up and I was like, hey, like, I'm an event photographer. I've never shot an event before in my life. He didn't need to know that. He's like, oh, we filled out the event, we found something for that, but we need a photo booth. And I was like, oh yeah, I do that too. And he's like, well, if this one pays $250 and you also still get free beer. So I was like, even better. So I kind of, talked to him. I mean, and this is like the classic fake it till you make it, like potentially lying, I think is almost what happened there. Cause I had never done it before. But I never said I did it. I did say I knew how to do it. And that was more about, I will figure out how to do it by the time the event happens, which I did, and it worked great. And I bought, some lights from, I think it was like Cowboy Studios, like the Amazon brand that is just the absolute worst of everything. But, it was a good starter kit, right? For someone who had, I basically spent the amount of money that I was going to make on lights because I didn't have any. But they were constant lights, and the venue was in this place called the Greenhouse Bar, which is literally a greenhouse. And as you can imagine, the light is shifting all day long, right? So it's the clouds coming by, it's dark, it's bright, it's sunny, it's cloudy, it's warm tones, it's cool tones, and then shooting natural light. I could have probably just not used any lights at all, but I wanted to have this like presence of professionalism. So I brought lights, and inevitably I spent like 2 weeks editing these photos because like I was matching the exposures to everything. And like we didn't have AI editing that just like this one, make them all look the same, which would have been a time saver. But then I also wouldn't have realized very quickly that I needed to learn how to shoot with flash because I watched a YouTube video or something like that was like, oh, you can control the ambient light with flash. And I was like, well, what's that? Like going into it, like I knew nothing as far as like, I mean, I could figure it out pretty quickly, but I didn't know what ambient light was. I knew the exposure triangle a bit, but there was like a lot of jargon and phrases and words that I didn't really understand. So I went to, YouTube University and just, started the educational road of like, all right, let's learn this thing. And I like literally the very next, because the guy liked the photos. So the very next job I came with, I think I bought a Nikon speed light because I was shooting with like a Nikon DSLR. I was like, oh, I guess I need to buy a speed light or a camera that works with that brand, and not thinking like, oh, I can get any flash, but because those like Nikon branded speed lights are not cheap. It was like $400, for what it is. I was like, man, what did I think? And I could have bought like 3 studio strobes for that much at the time. But yeah, so I did that and I used it for a while, and I was able to really control things. So I kind of went a backwards route. A lot of photographers go shoot natural light for years, and then they kind of maybe go into constant light and then studio like strobe light. And then like I started out shooting with strobes like almost from day one. We'll just call it day 2, I guess. And that's kind of what really made me realize like I really liked shooting with strobes and having the ability to completely control the image based on lights that I am bringing to the table. I'll shoot environmental portraits where you kind of have to, blend the two together. But there's something about taking a frame that's completely black, and then everything that is like in the frame and everything you see is something that like I did and I created. But yeah, so that's kind of the story of how I started. But when I was shooting those events, a lot of people would come up to me and they're like, hey, do you shoot weddings? Do you shoot headshots? Do you shoot real estate? Do you shoot this, that, and the other? And I would just say yes to everything because that's a good way to figure out if you like it or not. And then I kind of realized what I did and didn't like. And then I landed on, I liked working with people, but I didn't want to necessarily shoot events all the time. I still do. I only do like corporate events now because they don't want you there past 9 p.m. So that works for my schedule. They know better than anything happens after that is nothing they're going to use. So, so I still shoot events a little bit, but yeah, I was able to basically kind of network with people in that sense of like, somebody would ask me a question and I'd be like, yeah, sure. Like I'll do it. And I might, and a lot of times I would be like, yeah, like, or I haven't done that, but I'd love to do it for you, and just like do it on like a barter system. Cause I'm a big fan of bartering if it makes sense for both parties. In that case, you just set the expectation of like, hey, like I'll be honest, I've not shot a house. I've not done real estate photography before, but like, I'm more than willing to try it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Like, weddings were a little different because like you get one shot with that. You can't like redo it again, So I was always a little bit timid to shoot weddings first because I had this, I think everybody deals a little bit with like imposter syndrome, kind of, where it's like, I didn't think I was good enough. And quite frankly, I mean, early on, I probably wasn't. I don't know. I mean, like, but it just wasn't something that was overly interesting to me. Because really with wedding photographers, like I have the like utmost respect for them because they have to be good at events. They have to be good at product. They have to be good at portraits. They have to be good at portraits, not just one person, but like posing two people, or more with the family photos. And there's just so much goes into it. And I don't think I had the confidence to do that like when I started. And then by that time, I kind of just went down the pathway of I liked shooting, just portraits. And I'd be kind of curious to shoot a wedding, but I don't think I'm organized enough, honestly.
No, I totally get that.
So really organized to shoot weddings. And I'm just like, I don't love the organized chaos that comes with it, I think, because you have to pivot. You have to be able to pivot like really, which I think I do, but I don't know. Like I'm like making myself nervous just thinking about that. I'm not even going to do it.
Dude, we're in the same exact wavelength. I'm the same way. I've met a lot of wedding photographers, especially since going to imaging, because there's a huge social photography crowd at the PPA and stuff like that. And I used to actually DJ weddings when I was in LA, and I did maybe 5 over one summer, maybe 2 summers, and I couldn't take it anymore. It's just too stressful. And that's just DJing. The photography side takes a very special, sociable person. And I think you could do it, and I think you would do better than you think, but it does stress you out. There's just that level of
the thing about the weddings, and I don't want to make this like a whole thing about weddings because neither of us shoot weddings. So, but I did actually used to shoot video for weddings, and I had a kind of interesting reasoning for that. Is because also, like, kind of going back to Ready Light Media as my business, it was never just a photography business. It was basically like, if you can see it, we can do it. So we would do like graphic design, we would do video, we would do animation, like stuff like that. Like nothing probably to the scale of like what you did at your previous, thing. But I could hire, and like even now, I'm like, I'll take animation jobs and I'll just find somebody on Fiverr and just do it with them, and I'm. Whatever. It's like, I just tell them like, it's a lot cheaper to do it this way, but you can still pay me. But I like I've lost my train of thought here.
Yeah, no worries. Sip your coffee, take a break. We can kind of like reset. Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy. As far as like audio engineering, I think I'd love to dive into that when we wrap this next segment, because
we can. I don't remember anything, so it's
well, we don't have to dive into audio engineering specifically because this is not a podcast for audio engineers. But I think maybe just touching on the benefit of learning it, because it's very powerful, especially for your education.
Yes, and it's actually funny that I was having like audio issues before we jumped onto this, but that was just like because I was pushing the wrong button on the computer and had nothing to do with anything else. But well, I don't think because I'm on my laptop right now, and like I can do it on my desktop, but the desktop's over there, and I wanted to be here. So, point being. There's like no mic input on these new laptops, like, and I don't have a USB-C like audio interface. So I'm like, well, whatever. So basically it's actually connected to my camera, like the audio. And then I'm just running that through the HDMI cable of my like capture card. So
it's working.
Yeah.
It sounds great. I actually made this XLR cable in college.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I got the raw components.
I have a pair of microphones in the other room that I made in college. We did
No way.
I'm actually
Like
kind of curious.
Actual microphones. That's cool.
Yeah, it was like a whole project. So there was like we like did the whole thing. There was like the whole like science of sound that was for that class. It was like very much like learning how to do cables, fix things, fix amplifiers, like which I loved as like that was kind of my. I mean, should we just get into it of the what I wanted to do in audio? I mean, what the heck? Why not?
Well, let's first connect. Where were you? Where were we before you had to drink your coffee? You were talking about.
It was something about. I shot video for weddings, and the reason for. So the
let's just wrap that real quick
and
then move into it.
Yeah. So I shot video for weddings, and I was okay with doing that because I felt, for me at least, that the video is kind of an afterthought, and I could kind of be a fly on the wall and just be there. And you essentially just follow the photographer around and just like get footage of whatever they're doing, and then you cut it together in a 5-minute, thing, like to the song that they did their first dance to or something like that. I never did a ton of weddings, but that felt better to me. Here's my thing with like, I think I'm not like assertive enough, I think, to be a wedding photographer. Cause you do have to kind of wrangle cats a bit, in like trying to get like just from my own wedding. I remember like, we were like just trying to like get people who like we told to be there for the photo to come for the photo kind of thing, and I'm just like, I don't want to do that every weekend, so with that, I was like, okay, I just don't want to be, I'm not there for me. I'm there to capture their moment. I don't want to be like, hey, you guys need to be here, this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, I feel like that like takes away from their day. So I was like, I'm just going to shelve that and I'll move on and do something else. But yeah, the video on the weddings was kind of, and I would never consider myself to be like a wedding filmmaker. Just because I don't think I was ever that good at it. I mean, cause I'm not a videographer. I do video for like my YouTube, but I would really love to have someone else shoot that for me so I can concentrate on what I'm trying to teach rather than I really hope that camera's recording over there, because then your mind is kind of like it's compartmentalized and you're now worrying about two different things. And you're not able to focus on what you're really trying to do. But yeah, I guess the point of that whole tangent was you have to be kind of I don't want to say like a jack of all trades because the whole saying is jack of all trades, master none. But I think being able to be versatile and have the ability to do things, or at least have a team or somebody who that you can send someone to of like, because a lot of times people do want to lump in video with photos and if you're like, oh, I don't do that, I'll usually be like, oh, no, but here's like a list of 4 people that I've worked with. If you want to reach out to them, that's like separate to me. That's usually more for actor headshots. I'll do pageant headshots sometimes, like any of that stuff. Like, somebody redoing a modeling portfolio. Like I'm not doing that for no one who's coming in, because they're being forced to for LinkedIn is asking for makeup. They just want to get in, get out and get on with their life. But yeah, I think you do have to kind of be a bit, willing and able to do things that maybe are a little outside your comfort zone. But I think that's kind of where building a network and a community, and I don't mean a community as like I was talking about earlier with my like photography community is but having a people that you work with, I'm not saying regularly, but it's something you can offer to the table if a client is like, hey, we want to have hair, we want to have makeup, we want to have, video, we want to do this. Like having a community like in the creative world, like in your market is important because then you can offer more to the client. Be like, oh, like even if they don't want to, be like, hey, like we have this, and if you want to add that on, always offering something in that regard. But yeah, I mean, that kind of comes down to just like putting yourself out there. And I know that's not like overly like top of people's mind all the time. And I don't network as much as I used to. I should probably, but having kids and stuff, it's, I don't do things past 5 p.m. So, but it's in social media is you can network with social media too. I mean, I've met a ton of people that I work with in person that I met through Instagram, and it's just that I think is the purpose of social networking. I mean, it's literally called social media, social networking, whatever you want to call it. That I think is really very much what it was made for, was to connect people, and I think if you use it like that, it can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I think we can actually dive into that just a little bit. So kind of going more into the educational side of things, would you say, and I think we would both agree on this, that your social media following and networking there is important and it helps and it's something to, put some effort into. But would you say that taking those connections and converting as many as you can to real life relationships and friendships is really important to you?
Yeah, I mean, any relationship that's a genuine in-person relationship, I think, or at least this is in person. Like, I'm actually talking to you, even though we're, we're in different states.
Yes.
I think that's important because you're never your true self, because if you're on Instagram, you're on social media or online or anything, like, there's always a layer of like protection, and there's always this kind of like, I can be a different personality if I wanted to be on social media, and no one would know it. I was at a conference recently, and I was talking to a photographer who does YouTube and like does education, and another guy that was with me. He's like, she's like really nice. He's like, I didn't like, not that she doesn't come off that way in online or in videos or anything like that, but he was like, I think he expected, like, sometimes there is an ego that comes with anybody who's like an educator or like is thrust in front of an audience. You can get like an ego very easily. But I think, kind of grounding yourself in like, we're all just people. We're all just normal. Like, everybody's an authority of something in their own right. It's like, it just happens to be that, some people might find my Instagram and be like, oh, I like that. Let's, and then they learn from me, and that's awesome. And it's very humbling at the same time. But the more people that I can, actually connect with, and that's what I love about going to like things like Imaging USA and going to things like, WPPI, any of these conferences or anything like that, is you're taking these people that like it's always interesting, like putting a face to an Instagram handle. It used to be a face to a name, right? But now it's like, I'm like, oh, you're so-and-so, whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, like we've followed each other. We've literally like had very extensive conversations via like Instagram Messenger, but I've never met you before. And it's just kind of fun because you have this like, it just makes it very real, which I like. But it's also just kind of interesting because like there was somebody who came to my photo walk at WPPI, and like, he never told me his Instagram handle, but he's like, oh, I can't remember his name, or it's not important what his name was, but he's like introducing, we're having a great conversation. And then like 3 days afterwards, I was like, oh, that's that guy that I've literally like been talking to for 3 years on Instagram. And like, it just never came up because at the moment, it was just like, we're just talking about what's in front of us right now. It's not about social media. It's not about this, that, and the other. And that's kind of where, if you can kind of bridge the gap of social media between and what I'll call the real world, rarely are people going to hire you directly from a social networking app. I mean, because they're going to want to have at least a conversation with you, I would think. But I mean, I think sometimes but with social media, there's so much people, and this is kind of why it's not always a great like thing to get business from. I'm not saying you can't, but there's a million, how many users are on Instagram? 2 billion users, something like that. Something crazy, right? Let's just say 1% of those are photographers that are trying to get jobs, right? So that's still a lot of people. And a lot of these businesses, that's why you get DMs from dog brands and you don't have a dog, right? We were just talking about that earlier, right? It's like, they can just reach out to literally anybody and they know somebody will do it, and it's probably going to be good enough. So like, if they're looking on Instagram, it's probably not, and I'm not saying it always isn't, but it probably isn't going to be like the highest quality of client as far as like getting your full rate, because they know that they can just like move on to the next one that will do it for half or for free even, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to have this expectation of, you can't expect to, somebody will always undercut you. So you have to bring something to the table that's different. You can't just, you also can't be complacent of like, I'm just mad because I'm getting undercut and people are taking jobs from me. I was like, but if they're taking the job from you, and you can't take something that was never yours, so you can't claim that it was yours and somebody else took it. I was like, if someone stole a client that was previous to your client, sure, that's, not awesome. Sure. But you can't just get mad because like somebody bid differently than you and got a job over you. Like, no, it's not your client to have. You can't claim them. So you have this bit of, I've just found in my experience on social media, it's like you have a lot of people that are kind of, or brands rather, that will reach out and they're like, oh, like we'll give you an affiliate link and we'll do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to push your brand. I don't care about your brand. I've never used it before, so it's like, I will shoot your product or I'll shoot whatever you need me to do and you can pay me. But a lot of times, like once you start bringing money into that situation from a social media conversation, it's like as if they never reached out in the first place because they'll never reach out again. Yeah. But that being said, one of my best clients that I've ever had in my life came from Instagram, but it came from Instagram from he saw my work and was like, I love what you're doing with this. And I have this product that I think it would work really well with. And it has, and it's been great. But that's different. Like he technically found me through Instagram, but it was also kind of word of mouth because he worked with a couple of the models that I had worked with. So there was like an extra layer of vetting that kind of happened. But it was, and all in all, he did find me through Instagram. So it's not, I can't,
sure.
I can't dismiss it completely. He found me, he didn't hire me through. He found me through it because it's still kind of a portfolio. I mean, it's a social media feed, but it's, that's why even like on my reels, it might be an animation flyover, but the header image that goes on my profile feed is an actual image I took that somewhat usually relates to the education and the animation that I'm doing. So it's still, so when you go to my profile, it's like, it looks like a professional, portfolio. But yeah, it's, I mean, we can go down that road all day long as far as like what should go on your social media, what shouldn't, but there's no right or wrong answer to that. It's about a matter of what you want from it,
But like you said, there was still that mutual connection of you've worked with a model that he knew. So there's a bridge and there's that physical in-person connection, even though it wasn't direct to him, it was to an extent something that he could latch on to. And I think that's really important. And my third kind of like segment of my list here of notes that I'd like to talk with you about is your networking skills. And I think that's one thing that when I was with you in Imaging USA, that I really admire about you is your ability to just talk with people, be friendly with people, and get them to like you. Not necessarily that that's the goal, but you're just being yourself. And you're a very extroverted person. And I think we were talking about that, and you used to think you were introverted, but realized no, you're extroverted.
I think that's a superpower. It certainly helps, I would say. And I wasn't always like that. I think like I'm just kind of trying to think back of like, I feel like I've always had people skills, but that was kind of thrust on me from my upbringing of I was homeschooled, if you can believe it. I grew up moving around all the time, and we did a lot of extracurricular activities, right? So it was like, I was thrust into a lot of social environments. And I think in that sense, I was learning social skills very organically without realizing I was. Even though we moved around a lot, I didn't go to traditional school with people, but like, I would play sports. I did soccer, I did baseball, I did like all the things that you would, do as a kid. And with that is like, anytime you're around people, you're inevitably gaining social skills. And I didn't really and that definitely helped. And then I think once I got into like what I'm doing now, like with photography and specifically like the teaching and kind of going to these networking. I mean, I'll call it a conference a networking event. Essentially, it's just a 3-day long networking event with a lot of other cool stuff that's involved. And you have to go to it as I go to those with I'm there to network mentality. A lot of people go there as I'm there to learn mentality, and there's stuff for both people, and you can kind of go with both. I think when I first started, I was like, I'm going to go to learn I didn't talk to anybody. I was just kind of like fly on the wall, pop into classes. I don't think I talked to anybody at like any booth or anything like that. Like for you as someone who claims to be introverted, and there's nothing wrong with that either. You gave more business cards to random people than I've ever seen an introverted person do.
I was mentally preparing for it.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing.
I like minded people.
I think everybody has the ability to, just because you're not extroverted doesn't mean you can't be good at networking. You just have to probably talk yourself up, and kind of like get in the mindset of like, all right, I'm going to do it. And you might have to pump yourself up a bit more than someone like me who just like genuinely does like talking to people. But I also am like, when I said I thought I used to be an introvert, I know I was never really an introvert, but I love being around people, but I don't always want to talk to people, if that makes sense. Like I'll go and like, I'll just need to get out of my house, kind of thing. But like, I'll go to like a coffee shop or something and just like put my headphones in and sit. I just like being around people. I don't really want to always like be having these conversations with people, but having the ability to talk to people like certainly doesn't hurt me, I don't know. I think when I kind of got into this, position of teaching at a lot of these conferences and stuff, and people recognizing me from YouTube or Instagram or whatever, that's very odd to me. It's just weird to be like, oh, I know you from this. And I'm like, it's very like, it's crazy to me that somebody like knows me from not just like meeting me in person. Right. But I think from that, and like, I'm not like, people are like, oh, you're famous. I was like, no, like, let's just dial that way back. You've seen me online. That does not mean anything.
Yeah. It means you're nerd famous in a way, but
right. Yeah, for sure. But I think people still like look at people in like the education, like as like somewhat of like famous people in a way. And it is very weird for me, but I think I want to be as like genuine and real as possible. So I'm not going to like, if somebody's going to stop to talk to me, like I'm going to stop and talk to them. And there's always something that like everybody has something to offer, and if I don't get to talk to you, I don't know you, then like, I don't know what that is. I can't, you might have like a super cool story and just like something that's absolutely amazing. And like, if I don't sit there and actually like get to know you and talk to you, like I'll never know that. So that kind of comes back to the value of like in-person connections, I think. And that's something that I put a lot of emphasis on, I think, just because I do. I mean, you can tell, like, I mean, I feel like I've done 80% of the talking during this, but, and that's just kind of me. I also don't know when to shut up. So it's kind of, that can be, can be a blessing and a curse, I suppose. But I don't know that you can like train yourself to be extroverted, but I don't think you need to be extroverted to be a good networker either. You can kind of be good at networking, and honestly, like as someone who's not extroverted might actually be better because they're going to probably go about it a bit more methodically than just like talking someone's ear off like I inevitably do. I think there's something to be said about, kind of going in with purpose and not just like bull in a china shop like I can do sometimes. But, there's different strokes for different folks, right?
Yeah. I can say from the opposite side of that, when I went to imaging, it was a little bit last minute. I was a little bit underprepared because I, like you say, as an introverted person, I do prepare heavily, and it worked fairly well. And I did get to meet the people I hoped to meet. But I do think it hindered me because I felt like how I was thinking too much about okay, when I meet them, how am I going to naturally talk them and then get to the point of me asking something like, hey, do you need me to help teach here? Or do you need like a brand ambassador? Or how, I think too much about the transaction, and I think that really hindered me. And so that's a skill that I could learn to grow. So what would be your advice for me in that regard?
I think with anything, I think you have to kind of I think you like went into it with a direction and like a mindset and we'll call it a goal, right? You wanted to meet people and you wanted to, inevitably work with brands, right? Because that was the conversation that we had to get you to come to imaging anyway. And it was like, you were like, oh, I want to start working with more brands. And I was like, well, in order to do that, like they have to know who you are, right? And the best way for someone to know who you are is to go meet them. So I think it's a matter of, let's just use imaging as an example, right? You've got the trade show where there's like a brand rep for just about every brand, but not like the brand reps that are there aren't always the people that make decisions. So you kind of have to figure out who those people are. And a lot of that is just being around. It's not even like trying to bring something to the table. Like a lot, if you're just like, like my grandma used to, like an old penny that's just like it's always around, then you get noticed because you don't always want to go in being like, oh, I want to, I don't know if you're looking for brand ambassadors or whatever, because like that they get that from like everybody. So you need to kind of bring something to the table that's like just like, hey, like I've got this thing called Luma University, whatever, and just be like, yeah, check it out, and then walk away, and then and then you see him at the next event. And it's not like a lot of times it's not a one event type thing. You gotta just always be around, and I'm fortunate enough to where I was able to leverage the social media aspect of like, that helps you get on like the radar of businesses. They're like, oh, like you've got X amount of followers. We will now like consider looking at your stuff. It's hard because they want, let's just say, like using a brand ambassador as an example, like they want to leverage your following just as much as you want to leverage their brand, right? So it helps, but it's like Profoto is kind of an example of like, I feel like I went about that very methodically and I never asked. I never straight up was like, oh, I'd love to be an ambassador, partially because they kind of like, their original ambassador program got shelved a little bit. It's still there, but it's like it kind of got shelved and they brought a new one in. And it was just a matter of me leveraging contacts in a way. Like I would go, and also I used the brand already. That is a big thing. Like no one is going to be like, oh, here's free stuff, be a brand ambassador, but you've never used our product before. Like they're going to give that opportunity to someone who is already like a fan of their product, no matter what it is. So with that, like I switched over to Profoto in 2020 because I was using it a bit, but I shot with a different brand before, and then I was teaching at like camera stores and stuff, and they wanted to be able to sell a product that they sold in stores, and I was shooting with Pulse Buff, which they only sold factory direct. So like I couldn't do a class at B&H or Adorama or something like that and shoot with the brand I use because they didn't sell the product, right? So I would always shoot with Profoto, and I didn't have Profoto at the time, so they would have like the Profoto rep like bring me the gear, and then I would use it, and then like that was me making a connection. So like he had some pull, and this was. First time I ever shot with a Profoto light was 2018, right? So it took to 2023, how many years is that? 5 years to become an ambassador of there. So it wasn't like an overnight thing. I just like, So I was like, if I want to really like consider this, I need to switch brands. I need to actually use their brand. So, and then I was able to kind of like post and tag them in my Instagram posts and just kind of get on their radar. And this was before I've met anybody in person who would be, other than the original guy, like anybody who like in charge of their marketing or anything like that, and it was just kind of I was just always around. I was always doing something, but at the core, I was always providing something of value, at least what I thought, in like education and teaching. And I was basically representing their brand without, no, I don't want to say without their permission, but like, I was basically like, I was like, hey, like I'm using this light to create this image. And then they kind of just would see that pattern. And then I would, go, it helped that I would like go teach, because like a lot of these brand ambassador like programs, they want you to be in front of people talking about their product, right? Whether that's on social media, in person at conferences and classes, at workshops, or all of the above. That's the best way to do it, is if you're kind of hitting the ground running and you're talking about their brand, and it helps that it's a brand that I really like, that I'm not going to sit here and rep a brand that I don't think is good. And that's one thing on social media, is people will kind of like get free gear to do a collaborative post, and then like they don't really like the gear, or it's just not good or something like that. But yeah, I think like as far as kind of to go back to your question of how do you help, like what's like a networking tip in that sense, and like I kind of took it as like your question of like, brand ambassador or something like that. I don't think you had that specific question, but that's one thing. That's a question I do get a lot. It's like, how do I become a brand ambassador? I was like, well, there's like not really like an answer. I guess maybe some brands have like a application you can fill out or something like that. But I'm also very picky and choosy about brands that I work with, because I'm only going to work with brands that I actually like their product. So, but I think like at the end of the day, like networking is just a matter of just being there and being around. And the more you're around and in those situations, the more comfortable you're going to get talking to people. So it's kind of you gotta put your, one foot in the water before you can, dive all the way in. So it's kind of, you got to start somewhere. And it comes more naturally to some people. And I understand that I'm fortunate in the fact that I've got the gift of gab, and I can just like talk, all day long, until my voice goes like it's about to right now.
Hey, it's Jeahn in the hood again with my glasses on, and I just wanted to cut into the conversation really quick just to check in and let you know that I would love if you would take a second to hop over to lumauniversity.com. Check it out. There's some new stuff going on there. I have a new lead magnet out, which is the Product Pro, or Commercial Product Photography e-guide. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like the lighting guide for portraits if you have that one. If you don't, you can also get that as well. But just go to lumauniversity.com/product-pro, and that will get you the e-guide for commercial photography. And then you can just go to lumauniversity.com to get the regular e-guide. And that way you can get involved in my email list. I don't spam it at all. I send emails very, very rarely, but they're always filled with only the best information. So that is where my VIPs go. And that's where I would love for you to hop over right now and just have a look, check out the e-guides, and tell me what you think. All right, that's it. Let's continue our conversation with Jeff.
That's so funny. Well, I think one thing for me that would be extremely helpful, and to other introverts as well, is when you do get a chance to go to a trade show and you do get a chance to meet people and you have those rich conversations and you exchange numbers, how have you successfully, or how do you continue to foster the relationship with the people you meet afterwards? Do you call them up? Are you just tagging them on Insta occasionally? How do you maintain that without being obviously like, I want to connect with this person for business purposes?
Right. I think it depends on the brand, and it depends on the person that you had contact with, right? Obviously, just getting business cards or contact information in general. And then I'll usually wait like a week at least because if you do it right when you leave, like they're still working, they're still packing up, and they're going to not see that email, right? So
they're still tired.
I'll usually right. So I'll usually wait a week and be like, "Hey, it was great to meet you at such and such. I'd love to jump on a call or something like that." To and it's like you have to have something where like sometimes it's just a matter of, "Hey, it was great to meet you. I'll see you at the next one." And then that will usually kind of trigger like, "Oh yeah, I remember seeing that. Oh, what is that?"
Yeah, look at that. You got a thumbs up. I wonder if that's recorded on the podcast.
I don't know.
That's pretty funny.
Will it do it again? No?
I know it is. Yeah, you can do this. I think this one. I think this is built into like Zoom. Oh, my camera froze. I think that feature is built into Zoom. So this must be like a Zoom platform, or maybe it's Google Meet. I don't know. Anyway, that's pretty funny.
If it kicks us off at 45 minutes, which it hasn't, it's probably not Zoom.
Oh, I've got 8 hours of recording time for the month, so we got plenty of time. But I really like that. So you prefer kind of like the email follow up, and then you try to keep it. I think it's really important to go with.
That is you should probably have your picture on your email footer, just so they know who you are. Which I don't currently. Only on one of mine I do, and now I'm like, not I'm like, oh shoot, I should probably go do that. But it's in my, okay. So like you can find my picture because it's on Instagram, and I'll like my Instagram, my next level workshops, like all that stuff is on my email footer. And that's kind of an interesting thing of like, what information do you put on an email footer that's relevant without sounding pretentious? I am required by contract to put Profoto Ambassador on my email footer.
Wow.
I would rather not have it on there, if I'm being completely honest, because it's like that's also the email that goes to a lot of my clients, and they're like, "What the heck is Profoto?" Because they're just normal business people, right? So that's one that's interesting. Like they don't require me, but they asked me to do it, so it's not that hard, right? But I've got basically like my name, what I do, and I've got a next level workshops email as well, but I don't really use it that often. Like that's what my like emails from that. Like if I'm putting out like a promo or I did a blog post or something, like that's what that email's going to come from. But like I'm still using, like I said, I kind of have it's still kind of crosses over in a bit. So my Ready Light Media email is going to be a lot of times still for the workshop stuff. So if I'm making a contact at a trade show or something like that, I'm sending that email from info@readylightmedia.com, right? So that footer says Jeff Carpenter, photographer, educator, and then it has Ready Light Media, next level workshops, and I think my headshot website as well. And that basically covers everything that I do. Oh, and it has Profoto Ambassador at the bottom. But yeah, it's I like the email follow up because I think email tends to be a little more I still feel like it's more professional. Like I a phone call, like a lot of people just aren't like ready to jump on a call like right then and there. If you call them, they're like, oh well, like they'll either probably not answer because they don't recognize the number, or they'll reschedule another call like later in the week or something like that. So email for that is, I think, good because then you can just like send an email and be like, great to meet you. And that's a lot of times all that needs to happen. Unless you talk about something specific and they're like, hey, send me an email and we'll chat more about that. Then you can say, hey, it was great talking to you. I'd love to jump on a call to discuss this, that, and the other, whatever you guys had talked about. But that kind of has to come from them. It's always a little bit of like a dance. It's not you can't be too forward unless you're trying to like sell them something specific where like you have this, software that you think they could use, but as me, I'm just a photographer who, I don't have something specific to sell to a brand other than leveraging my social media or my, educational platforms. So that would be like my offer to them. So it's really just a matter of just following up, but not being pushy. I think, you're following up and you say, hey, it was great to meet you, love to stay in contact or something, and a lot of times nothing comes of that because they probably get a fair amount of those emails. But a lot of people will, like there's brands that like I can't crack as far as like who is in, because they're like so big, like Canon, for instance. Like I can go to a trade show. I will never talk to them usually, even though I use their brand and it would be like a great contact to have. I don't know who is in charge because they've got 300 employees at their booth. And I'm just like that. And they're being bombarded constantly by people. Right. And I'm never going to come up to someone, and I'm like the worst salesperson for myself. Honestly, I'm not going to go up to someone and be like, oh, I'm this, I'm Jeff. I have this many followers. I do this. And then like, here's what I offer you. Like, that's just not who I am. So I'm not going to do that. I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt, but that's just not my personality. Right. So I don't, I like to basically have people like want to work with me based on what I produce and what I have to offer on a, like my photography or whatever level, rather than I have a lot of followers work with me. That seems so ingenuine. And I don't think there's no real substance to that. I don't think, I mean, I think there's something to be said about it, but I want them to work with me because I'm bringing something to the table that is like my creativity or my, just my, genuine love for photography and love for their brand, rather than, leveraging a number, I think, because that's a lot of times what it becomes is you're trying to leverage a number, and that's, I don't like math, so I don't want to do that. So,
yeah. And it's unsustainable too. Like,
no, for sure.
If you build a brand relationship based on the number and they value that number, as soon as the number disappears, you're gone, and
for sure.
That's very important to have the foresight to know the companies and brands that you like and why you like them, that match up with who you are, and then let that kind of come together. And that just takes time, patience, and not pushing it.
Yeah. And also like connecting with other people that may already work with those brands too, because and I'm not saying like only be friends with people because you want something out of them kind of thing. But a lot of the stuff
that's why we're friends, Jeff.
Yeah, no,
that's
for sure.
That's the only reason I'm talking to you, because all I care about is the brands you've connected
and I'm okay with that, no. But a lot of the connections that I've made with brands like, like Studio Titan America is a brand that like never would have been on my radar. It's a brand I use all the time. Like the light that is lighting my face right now is on one of their stands. But that came from a connection of just like another photographer that, in a normal world, people would almost consider us to have like similar styles and be like competitors. But it's like, I don't think that doesn't really happen. I don't know. It's like the photography world there's a lot of work to go around, and there's plenty of fish in the sea in the pool of potential clients and whatever. But like he was just like, hey, like this brand's looking for people to work. And that was a very unique instance of, I mean, I'm not an ambassador of theirs, but like, I mean, I am in the sense of I'm not on their website, but I tell people about the product all the time because I actually genuinely really like it. But he was like, hey, they're trying to like get, so they sent me one and just like let me use it. And then I'm like, oh, now I tell everybody about it. And I think that's from that brand perspective, that's what they want, is they just want people to talk about it. Right. But that was one of the things where I wasn't on their radar. They weren't on my radar, but because of a connection that I made just with another photographer, I then became on their radar. And that happens too. It's just like, just no connection is a bad connection unless it's a toxic connection. So you can, you know what I mean? Like you always got to give somebody a chance, because it's not, if they might have something to offer that you didn't realize, or it's not necessarily like something on the surface. So, also you never want to burn a bridge. I mean, there's plenty of times where, I see photographers, or not even photographers, just people in general that like don't give somebody the time of day. And this kind of goes back to me, like I learned this in college when I was interning out at a studio, like a music studio, and they were like, never, I can't remember what the phrase was. Basically, it was like, be nice to everybody because you never know, like that person who's getting you coffee, like might be your boss on the next job. Right. So, and that kind of rang true to me in a lot of cases. Cause I was like, yeah, it's like things can just happen. You can meet one person and all of a sudden be like here to here, you know, and now you're in charge of everybody running the whole show. So you don't ever want to be, you know, talked down. You don't want to seem better than somebody else. You don't want to do that because, I mean, you never know. It's always going to come back to bite you somehow. If it, you know, just be a good person. It's not that hard.
Be a good person with Jeff Carpenter. That's the moral of the whole story here.
Right?
I think for me personally, as someone who is extremely calculated and very thoughtful and oftentimes too timid, I think what's really helped me and what kind of aligns with what your advice is have a goal, but don't push the goal. Be a friend, have relationships, you know, talk to people for who they are, get to know them, and let business come as it comes, because people like to work with people they like, you know? Right. So if they like you as a friend, not as a business person, they'll think of you when it's like, oh, hey, Jeahn does this. Maybe I should call him up. And I think that's a lot of kind of been my approach.
Yeah, and a lot of work that kind of comes my way is like word of mouth work. You know, I mean, sure, you run ads and do that whole thing and get people that would never have known you. But, you know, a lot of times people will just be like, oh, like so-and-so told me about you and they had good things to say. So I'll work with you. Like no questions asked, right? But it's interesting too. I don't know. It always just kind of comes back to like, be a genuine person and people want to work with you. If you're not, then like, why would you want to? Cause it's still you know, they're going to have to tolerate you even if they hire you. And like, you don't like, if you're literally a pain to work with, they're not going to, unless you're just the most amazing photographer or whatever you're doing person in the world. And even then, like it you know,
you don't get there just like without building relationships.
Right. Exactly.
I think that's some really, really good advice for me personally, especially because I do tend to struggle with kind of merging real relationships with business relationships. And I've gotten better over the years, but my analytical mind has always kind of held me back. So for me, that's huge. And I hope that helps a lot of people. And by the way, all the things that Jeff is talking about, we'll have in the show notes on lumauniversity.com. And you can check them all out there. We also, I think I put them in the description on YouTube. So if you're watching there, you can check it out. But I think we can kind of go ahead and wrap up. We're already over an hour in, I think an hour and 20 minutes in the recording, which has been awesome. I feel like I could chat with you all day, but I know you have lunch to get to. So we're going to end with what I always kind of end with, which is the lightning round. So I'm going to have a few questions and just tell me off the top of your mind what you think or what your answer is. So my first question is, who's your Mount Rushmore, your top 4 artists, not just necessarily in photography, but in any genre that inspire you?
Man, that's a tough one. I feel like I'm going to tell you that I don't have an answer, and this is why. Okay. I feel like you just get inspiration from so many people in like all aspects of life, and it might shift from like week to week. There might be like a song that like I really resonate with at one particular point in time, but it might be something else tomorrow. I don't know that there's like, you know, I'm not. I think because I went into photography and doing stuff like differently than a lot of people, like I didn't get a formal education in it. So I like the Ansel Adams and like these like people that are just like iconic. And I'm not saying that they're not, but I never resonated with them or anything as much as, you know, maybe someone who kind of did get a formal education in photography and you're like, these are the kind of the pillars of the industry kind of thing. I just never was like that. And I just kind of would see stuff and be like, oh, that's cool. Or this is cool. And, you know, and just kind of, so to answer your question in a non-answer, I don't really have one. But it's always changing, you know, it's kind of I'll get, like, I don't even know if it's inspiration necessarily, but like, I'm like recognize like, oh, that like having a daughter who's 3 years old, right? And I'm like watching all these Disney movies now, right? And then I look and I'm like, man, like Lin-Manuel Miranda's like does everything. Like he did Hamilton, he wrote all the songs for Moana, he did like all this stuff. And I'm like, man, like what doesn't he do? Right. So it's kind of, he's in the Mary Poppins movie, it's just like one of those things where like I recognize like that. And it's not, I think a lot of times that can be kind of taken as like, it's just sheer talent. But I feel like that's also like, it's just a lot of hard work that goes into it, and I kind of look at that as like, oh man, like that, like what can I take from that, even though it has nothing to do with what I do. And how do you apply that kind of work ethic and just drive into something that I can apply to my career and my, day-to-day thing. So I guess that's one, but it's kind of, but that was just like something that happens to be like, I wouldn't have thought that 2 years ago. Right. Cause I didn't watch a lot of Disney movies 2 years ago. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's very circumstantial based on what is currently happening in my life. And, I'm surrounded by Disney right now. So
we're in the same boat. And for the viewers who don't know, I've met Jeff in person just once now, but we have connected on quite a few things. I was also homeschooled as well. And I also have a daughter who's almost 3, so just a little bit younger than Peyton. And I've got another daughter who's almost a year, and then one coming in October. So we've connected on that front, and the Disney movies have been a real inspiration too. Like I totally get it, because the golden era of storytelling in Disney was like when we were growing up, and I think that's great to share.
Well, and just any of that stuff is like you start to see like patterns of like, I wouldn't say I'm a movie buff, but I definitely watch a lot of movies, and you start to see like, oh, like this person's just like in everything, or this person's doing this, that, and the other. And it's like, even like going on like the darker side of Disney of like Nightmare Before Christmas, was that Danny Elfman, I think, did the score for that. But then they like couldn't find anybody to do the voice of Jack. So he did that too. It's just like, just kind of on a whim of like, well, like if no one else will do it, I'll do it, kind of thing. And I think that mentality of just like always kind of being available is something that I definitely look up to as well. But that's kind of one of the cool thing about Disney Plus is that they have a lot of these behind the scenes of a lot of these movies, which is really cool. And a lot of the Marvel stuff too. So you look at these like, you can just, you can get inspiration from anywhere, but I tend to pull it from, something that I'm already watching usually.
Yeah. In the moment, pull from there. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And as usual, our lightning rounds are never lightning. So it's kind of become a staple of the podcast.
Right.
So the next question I have is, are you an early bird or a night owl?
Well, I have a 3-year-old, so an early bird. And I always was. I worked in bars out after college, and you're forced to be a night owl with that. I hated it. Like I want to be awake when the sun comes up and I can enjoy my day rather than sleeping all day and being up all night. It's just that I don't feel like anybody is like wired to be like that, but I think we tolerate it as like based on our job. I early bird for sure. No question about it. Even without kids, I'm an early bird. So
nice. That's definitely something we're opposite on. I'm a night owl myself. Well, I naturally a night owl, but forced to be an early bird with kids. Absolutely. Right. For your choice of a getaway, would it be a beach vacation or a mountain retreat?
Depends on the time of year. I would say mountain. I don't like sand, so
we got Anakin Skywalker over here. That's too funny.
I would say mountain, but I like. I don't know. It's why limit yourself to one?
I love that. I think I know the answer to this next one, but maybe I'll be surprised by this next question, but I think I know the answer. Cats or dogs?
Dogs, for sure. I grew up with cats, though. Okay. but we didn't have dogs. We moved around so much. It was easier to move with a cat. So, and I think I have like a really bad allergy to both, but which is funny because I've got huskies and they shit like nobody's business. I've just learned to tolerate it and love it. But yeah, dogs for sure. There's just something about like the personality of a dog that doesn't quite come across in cats, but I'm an animal lover in general. So if I had to pick, I'd say dogs.
Right on, right on. And then for food, do you prefer sweet or savory?
Probably savory. I get a sweet tooth every once in a while, but but I'm a fan of like sweet and savory, like a chocolate covered pretzel, where it's kind of, you get a little bit of both. But I would say if I go to breakfast, this is always kind of a good indication. If I'm going to breakfast, I'm going to get like the Grand Slam breakfast or whatever, like the eggs and toast and bacon and stuff over the pancakes almost every time. So nice. And then I'll get the pancakes and I was like, man, why did I do that? Because then it's just like sitting in my stomach and I just don't feel good. But I'll munch on some candy all day long. So
yeah, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know about your breakfast taste because I invited you 3 times and you never showed up for one of them at imaging.
Yeah,
just saying.
That was I was. Yeah. Okay. I got nothing for that.
Nah, it was crazy. I can't believe I even was able to wake up for imaging. It was just so much going on. So I no blame at all in that regard. Yeah. What's your favorite season if you had to choose one?
I love spring. I probably like fall more because spring allergies I don't love, and living in Tennessee is just like I don't know if you guys have like bad allergens and stuff up in Wyoming, but Tennessee is really bad. So it's spring, like you can probably hear it in my voice, like I'm so stuffed up right now. But,
no, yeah, I get
but
that.
I would say I like spring because it kind of is like coming out of the the winter, which again, I have no answer. I like winter if it's winter and I know it's going to be winter. Like when I grew up, I spent 7 years in Alaska growing up. I liked it because like when it was winter, you knew what to expect. In Tennessee, it's like they'll have these swings of weather of like, there's been like a 70-degree shift in temperature in a 12-hour period here. Like I was grilling in a sweatshirt and shorts, and I woke up the next day, it was -2 degrees, which like is really cold for Tennessee, right? So that I don't love, because it's like you just can't get used to it. You don't know what to expect. So if it's going to be winter, like I love wintry vacations where I'm like going to Colorado skiing and like I know it's going to be cold there, versus it like just fluctuates temperature all the time. So I probably spring or fall.
Gotcha.
Or autumn, however you want to say it.
And for all of you listening who don't use the imperial Fahrenheit system, that's -19 in Celsius. That's pretty cold. And so the next question I have is, how do you unwind after a long day?
Do I unwind? That's the question. No, I try to, but I am weird in the sense of I will try to unwind before the end of the day. So like after this, I have to send some emails, do some clerical stuff, send some quotes out, and I'll probably do that out of the house. I'll probably like take my computer with me somewhere in the true extrovert fashion that I am, and go be around people. So I'll probably do that. And then I pick my daughter up from gymnastics camp at 3, and it's 12 right now. So I gotta get going. So I'll try to kind of unwind before like she comes back. So then I can kind of like rewind, because like you got kids, like you got to be able to, like, you got to be there. So it's like, if I'm trying to like unwind, because by the time like she goes to bed, my unwinding is the like now 30 minutes before I fall asleep, because I'm just like, I'll just go to bed right after because I'm like exhausted. So, and I only have 1 kid. I can't imagine you almost having 3. So, yeah, I don't mean, I usually, I guess like a typical, I love to cook. So like, I like doing that, but then it's the like, oh, now I have to clean, and that like stresses me out too. So it's, if I can like grill, if it's nice weather, like grilling, because it takes less cleanup. So like I'll grill, maybe have a beer, maybe a glass of wine, just something to kind of like detach myself from the day. But we run our own business, and that's really an impossible task, I think, in the sense of you can never shut it off. Like I can't go on vacation because every time I'm on vacation, that's just like I don't get paid time off. Like every time I'm not working, I'm not making money, and I'm not able to you get the point, right? So it's like I never relax in the sense of like, let's go on a vacation for 2 weeks, because like I'll be like, well, that's 2 weeks I could have been working. So it's that. But on a day-to-day thing, it's just kind of like sit down, watch a movie, just kind of relax in that sense. And like I guess what a lot of people probably do is just like sit on the couch and do nothing. But yeah, I do like to cook, and that kind of like gets me out of the mindset of whatever happened. But
okay, that's fair. Cooking.
I don't have a stressful job really, so like I don't feel like I need to overly unwind a lot. But
and it's something you
I'm
love.
Fortunate in the sense of I do love my job, so it's kind of I don't have to like I don't know. You get it. You get it.
I get it. I've got 5 more questions. What is your favorite movie or series of all time?
Growing up, I was a big Star Wars fan. It's just one of those things. Like I was like a big Star Wars nerd. Like had all the action figures, all that stuff. So like I still resonate with that. And like honestly, like the new ones, dare I call them new, have. All right, he's grabbing something. Okay, yeah. So we get it. So this is one of the new ones I like. I like The Mandalorian. I think that was good. I actually like Book of Boba Fett. A lot of people didn't like that one. When I say new, I'm talking like now 20
Disney.
years old new. I'm talking like Phantom Menace, because that was absolutely terrible. But so you take those ones out. I didn't mind some of the newer Disney ones, but I feel like now it's like too much. There's like too much going on with it. It's like there's a side story or like a side series of some sort. But I like it when they bring back kind of the old characters, from the original trilogy. So if like top of my head, that would be probably like what I would say is from like a nostalgia standpoint. But like, I mean, there's literally so much television now that like you can't even, there's probably like a ton of amazing shows that I will probably never watch, because there's literally, it's not like it's a, cable, like watch it when it comes out and that's that. It's like, Netflix has like, they green light everything. So it's like,
I love that.
Yeah, I would say like if I had to have one, probably like Star Wars, the original series that was not the redone original one, like the one that I think they only sold it on VHS and it didn't have like the added like terrible CGI. Yep. Those ones.
I grew up on those too.
New Hope was always my favorite. I was between that and if I had to take it, I would say as a whole, A New Hope was the best. The first 25 minutes of Empire Strikes Back was awesome. And I liked Return of the Jedi, but it was like there was like the cutting between Endor and the ship thing that was like way too much like drama happening. I'm like, I don't care about that. Just get to the the Ewoks fighting. That's all I want to see. So
I'll have to have you on a podcast in the future where we just go ham on our debates on Star Wars, because I'm a little bit opposite of you, but I can understand it. Okay. What is your top 2, as someone who loves gel lighting, what is your top 2 favorite color combination that makes you smile?
I like your standard, red and blue makes magenta is kind of just a fun. I like that. I am a big fan of taking a red and just like blowing it to smithereens and like creating a cool like white to yellow to orange to red gradient. That's always kind of fun. And that's not really a color combo, I guess, but I mean,
I know what you mean. Kind of like
you
this.
know what I mean? Yeah, but no, I mean, it's like you can create some kind of cool effects with that. So, but I think beyond that, I would say, I was just kind of like like an orange and a teal is always just kind of, I mean, that, because you have to think like we can go down a whole rabbit hole of color and emotion too. So it's kind of, red and yellow. I like, because that's the whole thing about like McDonald's colors are red and yellow. Cause like,
yes,
I can't remember which one. It's like red makes you hungry. Yeah, but yeah. So I love kind of going the analogous route, but with that one specifically, it's like, I think it's like one of the two, I can't remember which one, but like red makes you anxious and yellow makes you hungry or something like that. So it's like you eat and then you just want to leave, like something. It's like something like that. Yeah. But like I saw a whole thing about like different like brands and different logos and stuff, and like the reasoning behind their use of color, which is fascinating. That's like that's almost like beyond color theory. That's like color psychology.
Color psychology.
And I think that's really, really interesting. And I kind of want to like dive more into that.
I come from a graphic design background, and I actually met a very prolific designer who's on YouTube named Chris Doe, and he's pretty popular, and he talks about that stuff a lot. But anyway, I don't know if we understand the concept of a lightning round, but I got 3 questions left. Do you have any hidden talents? I think you have a lot of hidden talents, but I have one on the top of my mind. But what would you say?
I am not a terrible golfer, but I'm not good. No, it's not over there. I have a hole-in-one plaque over on my wall. I took piano lessons growing up, like a lot, and I'm like relatively musically inclined, but not like classically trained. I enjoy it, but I take pride in the fact that I moved to Nashville to not do music, unlike literally everybody else who lives here. I kind of was like, you know what, if it happens, it happens. It's cool, whatever. But it wasn't ever anything that like all through high school and stuff. Like I played and, I did choir and all that stuff. I enjoyed it. I really did. But it's, I can do a mean karaoke, it's
it's funny you say that because one of my best friends growing up actually lives in Nashville, and she's in the music scene. But if you could capture any moment in history, what would it be?
Well, wait, hold on. Backtrack. You said you had something in mind. Was it the same thing?
Yeah. The piano playing.
Okay,
I saw your story of you playing Beauty and the Beast with Peyton, and it was just really cute.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to get her to do that more with me, but then she gets really sidetracked, understandably. But
Totally. I get it. Okay. So if you could capture any moment in history, what would it be?
Ooh.
Popular history, personal history, I don't care.
Like something back in the day, like, back at, I don't know, like this is weird because I have like no interest in this whatsoever, but like the first thing that came to mind was like something to do with like NASA back in the 60s. Like I have no interest in like space things whatsoever, but that's like the first thing that popped into my mind. But yeah, I don't know, like something like historical significance. I don't know.
I got
like
you.
Everything that's got historical significance that's documented has like already been documented. So it's like, what would I be bringing to the table? I guess is the question there. I don't know.
Potentially. Yeah, if you go back far enough before cameras, I guess.
Yeah. I guess.
And then the final question I have for you is, if you had one piece of advice for aspiring artists who admire your work and what you do, what would that be?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a matter of putting yourself out there and just like doing a good job, no matter what you do. I mean, make sure that you do everything you do to the best of your ability and the highest of your potential, and kind of have this idea of, the next thing you create should be the best thing you create. I think it's interesting. I was like watching an image competition like this weekend, and I've never submitted for like an image competition or anything like that. Like, it was very interesting. Like, I'd never really seen how that process goes. And I'm just like, I don't think I could like pick one image to like submit. I was like, because realistically, like for me, the next thing I do is like, I think should be better than the last thing, even though that's not always the case. But like, that's always the goal, is you're always trying to grow and you're always trying to produce something that's better than the last. So like, I don't think I would be able to like actually make that decision of like, this is the image that I'm going to submit for all these things. And I was like, yeah, because I can never pick, so, but I think because of that mentality of like always trying to grow, always making sure that you should never stop educating yourself. It's like you, me, we all, even people, like as someone who teaches it, I'm still taking classes. I'm still watching YouTube videos. When I'm going to imaging, I'm popping into these discussions and classes to learn something, because like you can't assume that you know everything. That's a fool's errand there. So just always kind of making sure that you can, I don't know, just setting yourself up for understanding that you have this ability to create something, but if you're complacent and you're just like kind of just like stay in your lane, then that's not really doing yourself any good. So educating yourself, trying new things, putting yourself out there, networking with people, I think is those are all things that can continued growth in what you want to do. I mean, if you think that you're awesome and and you don't need any to further yourself in any way, then like you're not doing yourself any favors. You're just basically just like putting a chain on your leg and be like, well, this is as far as I go, when you could be doing so much more.
So true. So true. It's funny you mentioned competitions, and we'll wrap up here and let you go. But I recently entered my first competition a month ago and got some awards, and it was really cool. But I think what's neat about it is, even though it's very traditional and it doesn't mean much in the real world for your business and stuff, it does push you to be better, and it does push you to understand what makes a great image and how to become better. But like you say, it's hard to put your older stuff through it. But yeah, it is a really great thing to look into and try out. And if you know of any image competitions in your area, you should definitely enter, at least see what it's all about. It's really good for you. But that's gonna, I think, wrap the podcast. What I'd like to do for you, Jeff, is just to give you a second to plug anything, mention anything you'd like people to check out, and how they can find you and all that.
Yeah. So Instagram, Ready Light Media. The online community I was talking about is on nextlevelworkshops.com. That's really where I have all my workshops through that. And I've been trying to do more virtual workshops just because I know a lot of people can't ever come to in-person ones. So that I'm starting to ramp that up. I bought a mannequin head so I can do that better. So nextlevelworkshops.com. If you want to join the forum, it's just nextlevelworkshops.com/forum. And then you get a free lighting guide with that when you join. And then I'm really just trying to get people to join that and be a part of it, rather than just like, I don't want it to be another social media feed of my own stuff. I want to have other people submit and, ask questions and tell us what they're working on, all that stuff. But those are really the two big ones. Ready Light Media on YouTube as well. And I'm trying to jump back into that, but YouTube's a lot of work, and I don't have all the time in the world. If you want to hire me for headshots, just go to best-headshots.com and that will happen. And then, I think that's it.
Nice.
Awesome. Did I forget anything?
Way to go. No, awesome. That was amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, dude. That was wonderful. It was super good to get to chat with you, and thanks for taking the time to do this. And I know it was a little tough getting our schedules aligned, but I hope to do it more in the future. And
Oh, good.
really
Thanks for
helpful.
having me, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
we'll
fun.
have
to have a chat about Star Wars, and you can tell me why you're wrong and what you think. No.
Yeah, maybe I'll buy you another beer. That's another tip, bonus tip for you listening. If you want to get on someone's good side, like I did with Jeff, buy him a beer or two. That seems to work out.
It never hurts, It's well, and I think, like, I know we just wrapped up, but let's actually talk about that a little bit, in the sense of, we had like a great connection with some like vendors that was a very organic meeting with like the Westcott people and my friend from Capture One and stuff, right? Like, we probably wouldn't have met up with them at all if we hadn't randomly ran into them. And then that's the cool thing about those shows, is people are like open to like, let's just go to this place, let's go to that place, and like, and I think, and I'm sure you had like some great conversations with them, and it was a good connection beyond, because that's when you get people in their element. If you can have a conversation with them outside of the show, then they're going to open up a little bit more. You're going to have probably a better connection with them versus they're there for work and like they're just getting bombarded with people asking them questions. You know what I mean? So like that kind of just goes to the making those connections beyond like the actual like 9 to 5 or whatever the actual event is. But yeah, like that was just kind of over let's grab a beer real quick and then here we are, so, and it doesn't have to be a beer. You can do literally anything, but it's more of a just, being open to, being around outside of the traditional, like confines of the event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's another way to connect on a different wavelength rather than just on business. You can connect in a more personal way, share stories, get to know each other. It does help a lot. Yeah, that's a good bonus tip. That'll be a bonus tip for those of you who stay to the end.
Well, wonderful. Awesome. I had a blast. Tell the family I said hey. And is it still cold there? Stay warm if it's still cold. And
we had a cold spell, but it's been warm the last couple of days. Yeah. So
define warm, because my definition of warm, I'm sure, is different than yours.
Yeah. So
and
yesterday,
talk Fahrenheit here, because that's what I do. So
yesterday, the day before yesterday, it hit like 40, but it was windy, so it was pretty chilly for us. And then yesterday, suddenly it was 72. Today,
well, I did this
65.
I found out how to turn this off. It's reactions up here.
Oh, that's funny. Okay,
I did the update of the newest update for like Mac OS, and it's like giving me all these, because I can basically do because I can do the. Is this making me blurry background?
Yeah,
here? I mean, you can't really tell.
The fake blurry background. You got a fake
anyway. Yeah, well, I can do studio light.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean? Oh, it darkens the background.
Interesting.
Okay. And then you can turn reactions on too if you want. So you can do this and darken the background and have it all blurry. But like, how does that work? Interesting.
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, that's a thing that I don't care about at all.
Learn something new every day. That's great. Cool, dude. Well, I'll let you get some lunch. Thanks so much. That was really fun. I'm glad to have you on recording, because we kind of had these conversations at Imaging, but it's just so busy. I can't remember all the details. So,
for sure. And it's like, I like to have these kind of very organic, just whatever happens. I know you like sent over the outline of the questions you're going to ask, but then I couldn't find it or open it. So it didn't really matter anyway. So, but no, it's always good to, have these. I've found that whenever I've done this, it's always turned into like maybe a little off the rails, but like relatively good information most of the time still. So, I go off on tangents and you got to reel me in, but
No, I think of it like just having a conversation with a friend with somewhat of a guide, and then recording it and sharing it with the world, because people seem to like it. And it's better than not recording it and not sharing it with the world,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Who knows? Someone might find value in something I said. That would be cool.
Maybe. Yeah, I think they'll more find value in my questions than your answers.
Oh, probably. Yeah. I mean, because who cares, right?
Yeah.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jeff Carpenter. Again, sorry for my appearance. I just really, really, really wanted to get this episode out and start getting podcasts rolling again, so I will be more organized going forward, I promise. But thank you so much to Jeff for taking the time. I encourage you to check out the links in the description of this video or on lumauniversity.com. If you're on Spotify, just hop over to YouTube or the website and you'll see the links there. Check out Next Level Workshops. Jeff has some amazing in-person training as well as online training and all sorts of things. And if you like my content, you're definitely going to love his content because he's just a phenomenal guy, and he's actually the reason and inspiration for a lot of what I do without trying to steal from him too much. But I really appreciate all of the love and support, and I'm excited to have more episodes coming out. And I think that'll just about do it. Thank you all so much for tuning in, sticking to the end, and I'll see you in the next episode where we're having another amazing guest. I'll talk to you soon.